going to introduce you.
Oh. Say he's a guest. Say he's a guest.
On excitability of the localized structures induced by spatial inhomogeneities and grid. And well, you have, 50 minutes.
Okay, but I will not speak about any chemical reaction or something like that. So, the talk I'm presenting today second part. That is a paper. It's a paper that was part. In talk. So I hope that the 20 plus minutes and I'll speak up to 30 minutes. I hope that less in the initial part. So I'll give some motivation. Some more or less motivation already many years ago, not to this precise work. Then some introduction. There are two buzzwords here: excitability, localized structures. I'll try to explain what this does. Then excitability of localized structures. So this is still motivation, introduction. This is the previous history, and this is really the title of the talk. So this is a habitude. So, well, the motivation of this work I'm presenting here, some some part of the first paper of the paper by Coulet et al. in Nice. Well, this paper represents some stories, some ideas on this field of using localized structure to data storage. This is not the first, by any means, the first place where this idea was suggested, or the place for anything. Basically, it's one of the last papers on this field. This is 2004, but I think it has a quite, well, in others, it's a motivation for some doing something, using localized structures. You will see later, which is the idea to store information. Here, it is quite well motivated. Then they give some, apart from a lot of blah, blah, blah ideas and so on, they have this figure, for instance, in which you can see which is the idea they present. Well, the idea is that one could store in some 1D medium, for instance, or 2D medium, some information, digital information, a set of ones and zeros, as in some material, and then, of course, how all these ones and zeros, these dark or white spots interact with part of the paper. I will not enter into this. I'll study something simpler, so normally just 1 bit. So the idea is that I can then use some local information, somehow local information of some extended media, and then to decide whether this local part of the medium will be a 1 or a 0. Well, second motivation that I'll try to join is this is the cover of a book in '99 of Christoph Koch that has been for many years in Caltech. Recently, yesterday I was checking his webpage, and he has moved to some research institute, apparently, maybe private. So it's Biophysics of Computation, Information Processes in Single Neurons. The title is not so, has a lot of stochastic process, dynamics, neurons, physiology, ionic channels, mechanisms, and so on. So really the computation part, I would say, it's not commensurate with the title. It's actually quite modest. You may have a look. But then here, so we have this left and right part. So neurons, in a way, are a prime example of excitable behavior, and at the same time, as we know, are the main units, cells in the brain that process information. So I try, many years ago, these two gentlemen who are sitting in the first row, Per and Damien, we did something like questions like, do localized structure exhibit excitable behavior, so joining these localized structures, excitability of the neurons. Is it useful to process information just as neurons do? So localized structures are well known for providing, as I said, this information storage capabilities. Are they, I mean, put one in Vision. I mean, another thing is that it can be built something else because beyond just storage. Well, this is the motivation. So, excitability. Sorry, there's a lot of tests. I did what, I don't know if one should do or not, but many people do now. Just go to Wikipedia and then to look for some concepts. I went to several concepts like excitable cells, action potential. Actually looking for excitability, I think I came to this one, it's action potential, and looking for excitable. I went to a different one, so there are many of them are linked. So here we already see that it speaks about action potential. Sorry, I couldn't find a way of properly. I had some technical problems to write in red, for instance, the parts I'm interested in. But see, here something you see is that this thing of the cell rapidly rises and falls. We'll see this later in excitable cells. And this is interesting, include neurons, muscle cells, endocrine cells, and some plant cells. And here we also have some function to provoke release of insulin. So excitability appears to be really important. Well, here's some description of this, very boring, so let's go to a figure that I also found I think in Wikipedia or something similar. So according to this, this is an action potential, so I have some neuron that is some cell in the brain, is in this, in principle has this constant potential around here, you can see minus 70 volts. Then there is some event, and then it's written here some threshold. So if I'm able to cross this threshold, then I'll have a whole response that is well defined, and then I have a number of features. For instance, if I have a sub-threshold response, it's quite small. If a super-threshold response is maybe one order of magnitude. More important, I have some repolarization phase that it's some period in which the neuron cannot be excited, then comes back, and so on. So, super-threshold, small postsynaptic potential, super-threshold, all or none action. So these are things that are in the books, and also one can, from this thing, and this is what neurons do, I mean, all this action potential can transmit to other neurons, and then in the end one can have something that is known as an excitable medium. So it triggers some excitation in some part of the medium, and then it's jumping, let's say, it's going from cell to cell, let's say, in the biological context. So now let's go. Well, there are some paradoxes with this that I just mentioned. For instance, well, the idea we're mentioning is that we have this resting potential threshold, and if I cross the threshold, I have this all or none, so I have spikes. If it's below the threshold, I have no spike. But there are some cases, and this I took from some reference that you will see in a while, because I mentioned. For instance, here, the author says, which is the threshold? I mean, I have a variety, and also it's going up, then it's going down, so where is the threshold here for all these responses? Well, this is a so-called sub-threshold response. Also, there are some cases, for instance, we said this action potential means that once I cross the threshold, I excite, then I have, and then it come back. So, what is this second spike? I mean, just applying the first perturbation I applied. So, now I'll come to another concept that will be important later in the talk, and I use some biological system to explain it. That is that excitability, I mean, there's not just excitability, as I mentioned, action potential, all or none response, beyond threshold response. Basically, there are two classes of excitability. So if one goes to really patch clamp experiments, for instance, in neuroscience, then studying real neurons, isolated neurons, and so on. Of course, in the neuron in the brain is much more difficult to study, and so on, as you know. For instance, here there are two types of neurons. One of these is layer 5 pyramidal cell, whatever, brainstem, whatever cell. And then I apply, in this case, not a not a transient perturbation as before, because it was up and then down. Now it's a constant perturbation. And then I see clearly two different types of responses. Here I see that, I mean, for different values of this I, of this parameter, now, I mean, the neuron very high is responding with a small period, then the period is increasing, so here is very large. While here, you can see that it's more constant. So if I plot this, so some frequency, so the inverse of the period normalized in some way to pi or not to pi, whatever. In this case, as a function of phi, because here we see that there are implied several values of this parameter. Whatever parameter, here is not important what exactly is it. So I see these two different types of frequency to parameter, let's say, response. In one class or type of excitability, I have all possible responses, so this is what I saw here. Period can be very large, so remember that period large implies frequency small. So it means that I start from zero, or almost from zero, while here I have a discrete jump. So I have some band of frequencies that start in these units from 100. That have, I mean, just start with a finite frequency, so don't explore this area. Many of you, for sure, Claudio and so on, know the integrate and fire model. So an integrator is the basic element of this model. But the second class is also very important. This is so-called resonator neurons. There are some neurons that respond specifically to some frequency band that don't respond to others. Well, the integrator, I mean, say, accumulate the input. It's the integrate and fire model until it fires. So, well, so there's something that I cannot enter just to say that with the same ionic mechanism, the neurons belonging to the two different classes I'm talking about. Well, I may have neurons from different microscopic mechanisms having the same kind of excitability. So what I'm not suggesting, but starting to use from now is forget about this maybe simplistic definition used by the physiologists in the beginning. I have a threshold well defined, I have all or none, whatever, everything is very clean. We'll go to something else that is excitability in phase space. So we'll look at excitability as something that is happening in some phase space. So some phase space, like mechanical or non-mechanical phase space. So here this line of thought has been fostered, has been, I'm not sure that initiated. This has put a lot of effort. Eugen Ishikevich, that at least some of you like Claudio, I know that you know, in this long review paper, almost 100 pages in 2000, and also this book that I know some people here in the audience use, Dynamical Systems in Neuroscience. By the way, this is where I found the previous paradoxes. So now going to the topic, what he suggests is that this is some phase space in the system defined in some way. So what he suggests is that excitable systems are systems that are more or less close, but relatively close to a bifurcation to oscillatory behavior. So excitable system, well, by the way, there's something I didn't say, so it must have a rest state, so it must, excitable systems have a stable fixed point, steady behavior, but then it's close to some instability. Well, this is what Ishikevich says. To some instability that creates some oscillatory behavior, then we can see that at some parameter, so these are supposed to be, you can see that qualitatively these two phase portraits are quite similar. here one has that the loop closes, so this is a limit cycle, so this is already stable, and here does not close, but almost closes, as you can see qualitatively. So the system, then if I perturb from the stable fixed point, as this one I take to some neighborhood outside of this fixed point, then makes a more or less complicated loop in phase space, well-defined trajectory that resembles a lot the limit cycle that happens for a closed parameter. So the system, so the spike then happens when the system is, and we'll see examples later about this. This is just some cartoon, of course. So the spike is when the system makes a long trajectory, and then the sub-threshold condition is when the system returns trivially, linearly to the system. So you say this is a pseudo-orbit, because this is like a piece of a limit cycle, but this is closed, so it's stuck here because the system stays here. And excitable systems are close to bifurcations that leads to oscillatory behavior. Well, and the observed behavior depends on the dynamical scenario that takes place. So this means there are many things in which a stable, steady solution can become, can have some oscillation instability. So depending on the way in which this happens, I'll have different routes, and also I'll have, and we'll account this later, we'll have class 1, class 2, and other features of the system. So just starting, well, this is very complicated thing, just remember some names, the Southern Northern invariant circle. So there are some possibilities, saddle, homoclinic, supercritical Andronov-Hoff, and subcritical Andronov-Hoff. I don't want to enter, this is already a complicated, of course the presentation is not over, it's just a technical change. And so now we continue with the next point. So I introduce a little bit qualitatively, we'll see later in the examples we found. Now we introduce the concept of localized structures. So localized structures are, let's say, in a simple way, I should have this kind of sketch. So are like, say qualitatively something like this. Well, they could have tails also. So I have in a spatially extended system, I have some homogeneous background, and then in some localized part of the system, I have some small peak, but the rest, so I have most of the system is in the homogeneous state, just a small part of the system is in a, let's say, excited state. Well, these are found in many experimental situations, in chemical reactions, those called spots, gas discharges, a group of Professor Purvins in Münster, fluids in France, also in vegetation, and now some people here at IFISC are working on this viewpoint. And here there are some experimental pictures, vertically vibrated granular layer, this by Sweeney's group. So, well, this is a different kind of thing of object than the ones that we're studying, because this is force and movement. But this is the group of Professor Lang in Münster, and this is the group of Jorge Tredice and Lujato, and also part of the experiments were done here by Salvador in Mallorca. And these are somehow old references. So one thing I want to distinguish, and I should go fast on this, is between localized structure and the usual propagative solitons. Here in this audience, I think there's no confusion, but in other audiences this is important. Ours are dissipative, so have a particular form, while the others are conservative and have families of solutions. And this is one example by the group of means. I have a homogeneous background, then I apply some perturbation, I write, so I have let's say the 1, so the bright spot, I stop applying any perturbation, the bright spot continues, then I apply some anti-perturbations, negative perturbations, you can see here, and then the spot disappear. So this is the idea. From the homogeneous background, I can either excite in a localized zone, so I can start for this completely flat, then excite here the mountain, and then again excite back. And well, there are a number of experiments. This mentioned it works in Nice, in Brussels, and this I'll speak later. So also being very general, these localized structures there appear typically at least in two different routes. One, so this is not the one we have studied also recently, including this paper. This is the first part of a series of two papers. And appearing in systems with two equivalent states. So in this system with two equivalent states means that one has, let's say, the low state, high state. Then these states can be connected by a kink. And also, again, I may have another part in which I have, again, the low state. So it's connected by an anti-kink or vice versa. So in some situations, not in principle in this one, because here the fronts are monotonic, two fronts may come close and then at some moment, stabilize one kind of this horn state. I'll be discussing rather in this other second kind, not bistability between two homogeneous solutions, but bistability between a homogeneous solution and a pattern, an hexagonal pattern. Here, there's some works in this field, including this one that is really important in this field that will appear later. So, the system that we are, well, I must think this is something. I'm writing here this optical setup, medium and so on, but our work is completely theoretical. So it has, it's motivated by this setup and tries to mimic, in some sense, features of this setup. So we study the setup that corresponds to the so-called Lujato-Lefebvre equation that was suggested here some years ago. And this corresponds to a optical nonlinear cavity with a material with a cubic Kerr nonlinearity. Then, well, there's the cavity has losses, and then there's an input field to cover for the losses. This output field are the losses, and then one has 3 dimensions. One has this optical ray that is, as is written here, traveling around the cavity, then making some averaging approximation. One finds this equation, this Lujato equation for the transverse degrees of freedom. So the system here, this is the homogeneous solution. This is found in an implicit equation, and this equation becomes unstable at this value, this stationary value equal to 1. This is important to remember now. So there was a lot of work that I tried to summarize. So I have the homogeneous solution, and then here at 1, as I said, is equal to 1, then becomes unstable subcritically, so means that it's folded back. So means that in this region I may have, so here I will also have a similar branch for the pattern itself, but here in this region I may have coexistence between the homogeneous solution and this structure, this like a cellular part of the pattern. So I have this, and then here it's also important because it will appear later. This stationary solution then becomes Hopf unstable, so it starts oscillating without moving. This like this, and then it starts like breathing up and down. And this is the temporal axis, so this is one can see how it breathes up and down. Well, by chance, characterize, so by chance means because we are not really hoping to find this, we found a regime in which a localized structure disappears in precisely, we found a chance in which fulfills these conditions I mentioned before. So I have some bifurcation in which I have some oscillatory behavior at one side of the bifurcation, non-oscillatory behavior at the other side, and this bifurcation is a homoclinic bifurcation, so a bifurcation in which a limit cycle becomes the homoclinic orbit of a saddle point, and this is one of the possible oscillatory instabilities that may lead to excitable behavior. This was studied in these two papers. I don't want to enter much into details. There's some scaling that is logarithmic, blah, blah, blah. And then, well, here, this is a qualitative sketch, just draw by hand. We can able to recover this quantitatively, plotting, I mean, in the system. There are two modes, the most unstable mode and the most stable mode, by the way, that are localized, that are these two. All the others are, the localized are extended modes. If one plots the one versus the other, and this, we show this in this paper, one can recover quantitatively let's say, this scale. And this is very important because it means that this is an infinite dimensional system because it's a PDE, a partial differential equation, but the equation is actually behaving, I mean, actually 2 degrees of freedom are important, so I can describe by the dynamical system in 2D. Well, and this is our point, excitability. So we are exactly at this point, so we are past this oscillatory instability, we are in a steady state, but the system, to say in some sense, through this bifurcation is prepared in such a way such that this part here, this manifold here, this so-called stable manifold of the saddle point, is able to act as a threshold. So the system is actually excitable. And this is what happens, and this is what we studied. And it's actually, I mean, depending on the parameter, we see a response at different times. So this corresponds to what I said in the beginning, class 1. And these are some pictures for different times of how, I mean, should be some time before in which before I start this splash, let's say the system is flat, and then I have this peak, and then I'm flat again. And something very important is that the system is not locally excitable, so it's not a system in which, I mean, it can be defined by for instance, Fitzgerald or something like that. This is locally excitable, so it's a extended system, but excitability is not a local property of the system, like in normal excitable media, but it's something that emerges from spatial coupling. Locally, it's a system that is not excitable. So. Much faster. So now this system, I mean, gave us a lot of imprecision in some sense because the system is translationally invariant, and one could have on the one hand the solitons in any place, but also, I mean, this distance that is the threshold is defined dynamically. So this distance that is the distance between the stable point and the saddle is defined by the parameter of the system. It's something that they cannot control. And we were interested in being able to control these as small as we want. So we took the system, this is the previous system I was mentioning, and we added, well, actually, this AI, so until here would be the old system, so this being homogeneous. Now we add something that is like a small perturbation, like this is actually a Gaussian. We add a Gaussian, so this is a defect in some point, and this will be illustrative for things that I'll see later. And then in this case, I observe a whole new route towards oscillation, including this other new route in which excitability could appear. So I have a limit cycle in the middle, a saddle and a node appear. This has a different scaling, not logarithmic, and also I can recover quantitatively the plot. And I can finally, and this concludes this part, I can understand all the scenario plotting 2 parameters of so the system actually has 3, so I have to freeze one, this one. And from the other 2, I can see something that maybe is too much information for the moment, but something in which the behavior that I obtain is organized by a number of spatial points in which several lines come. One of them is this C point, another one is this SNSL, this another point here, and the other one is a third point, a Takens-Bogdanov bifurcation that I mean, it's not seen in the range of this point. These three, I mean, in this sense, we say that these 3 points organize the scenario that we have in the system. So now we have to come to computation. So and this is something that Damia beautifully explained something 3 years ago, I think, in 2011. I checked here in an IFISC seminar. So I'll go fast because most of you already heard. But with this setup, we are able to design some logical gates, and means some device that is able to process some input to decide whether this input fulfills some rules or not. For instance, an OR gate means, so here we have, what we do is we place these 3 potential localized structures. They are not localized structures. These peaks here are very small and are peaks that I'm applying continuously. This is the homogeneous perturbation I mentioned before. Then from these 3 points in which I apply the perturbation, for instance, some OR gate means that I can respond to, so the 2 outer peaks are input ports and the central peak is the output port. So this means I apply some perturbation, for instance, a 1 here, and 1 is indicated here by a fire, and the absence of fire is a 0. So this is a binary operational system. So I applied some input in the left port, and then the central port that is the central peak that is zone that is the central localized structure responds by also being by a firing. So it means that 1 is corresponded by some 1. Some other 1 here responds by 1 here. And now the other possible, so OR means that 1, 0 is 1, and the other possible operation is 1, 1. So I'm applying at the same time some perturbation to both outer ports, and then also the system responds by a 1. This is because this is an OR. An AND is a different logical gate that is, this is made by having some different distances or different parameters in the system. And the system now, as you can see, responds. So AND means that only if both, so if nothing is applied, then the answer is nothing. So 0, 0 would be 0, also as before. But here, applying just as I did before, just a 1, the system does not respond. So this is an port. While applying both 1 and 1, this is the distance in the coupling between these two parties such that then the system responds. So this is an logical gate. And a NOT gate can also be constructed, but it's not based on excitability. So I'll skip. But the important thing is that with these 3 logical operations, or a NOT, I can build none or nor universal logical gates. So it means that I can have full functionality. And this, Daniel already spoke out about this. And this, by the way, was published in 2012, Damia's talk in this Journal of Physics. So now I come to the real new part in my talk. I'm more or less half of the seminar. So now I come to the new part in which I'll explain in more detail. But you will see that there are many concepts that refer to previous things we studied in the past. So the title of this slide is Pursuing Localized Structure Excitability. What does this mean? So we are referring excitability to the existence, so to some state in which the system has a stationary behavior, but is close to some oscillatory instability. So the point is that this oscillatory instability it's not something that, as far as we know, and from the systems that have been studied, at least mostly in the optical literature, it's not something, so localized structure that sometimes are also called dissipative solitons, typically don't exhibit oscillatory instability. So the Kerr system that we studied, and that has some particular bifurcation structure and has this oscillatory instability, is not generic in this sense. So it's a system we have studied, we have shown many things, but when one goes to the lab and really finds these localized structures, it turns out that they don't oscillate. So if they don't oscillate at any regime, then there's not this regime that close to an oscillatory regime, the system has this excitable behavior. So we were inspired by a couple of papers in the group of NIS, groups of NIS and Como, Predice, Lujato, in which they consider what they call a soliton tap. So drifting, so they had a system, they had the effects, they apply a drift, and they observed this kind of soliton fountain tap. So they observed that the system was, I mean, this we had a tap, so we had like a source of solitons. So applying this mechanism, the system was like, I mean, one was producing in a constant way this soliton. So this is a way of having some oscillatory behavior. So one can, in principle, can have the situation in which there is, I mean, just one localized structure steady, I mean, it's not doing anything, and go to a regime in which one is having oscillation descends. No, these oscillations I said before, the system is oscillating, electric field up and down, but oscillations in the sense that in some spatial dimension, in the direction of the drift, the system is doing some periodic behavior. So we decided to try this recipe, and this recipe to induce this dynamical behavior, and we'll see later how it turns out, is having a system with steady localized structures, then adding drift, adding some defects, some special inhomogeneity that in principle, so alone without drift would try to would result in pinning of the localized structure, and then our guess that we'll prove now is that this produces oscillations in this sense that I was mentioning before, and also excitability. So to make, in a way, a tougher study, we studied, so we consider like the silliest, in quotation marks, equation that one could think that we could have some oscillatory behavior. Of course, by itself. So to try to prove that nothing, I mean, comes from some particular hidden structure of the system or whatever. So this is the real Swiss-Hohenberg equation that is written here, and this in one spatial dimension. So people could also work in two spatial dimensions, and both dimensions would have, spatial dimensions would have different roles. One, so because as we are applying drift, there will be one direction that is that carries the drift, and then it will be a transverse one. But we decided for the moment just to work with this 1D equation. This equation has a lot of symmetries, parity, translationally invariant. And a very important feature is that it's variational. So one can find some functional from which it can be derived. So it means this rules out the possibility of having any so oscillatory state. So the equation is not only that does not have, so but cannot have. The equation as it is written here, of course, we'll do something else. So this equation in recent years has become a test ground and a model in which has been studied for the prints of patterns. So the system exhibits some transition at this. So the equation has a number after properly dimensionally scaled. In scaling out the maximum possible has a number of parameters. With respect to this parameter, A, and also as a function of G, that is here, one has a transition between having So this will be a Turing instability between having supercritical and subcritical patterns. So for A larger, not really for equal, larger than this value, one has subcritical pattern. This is what we like. So one has a supercritical patterns is nice for studying pattern, but studying subcritical patterns means that then the branch falls back, and then one has this coexistent region. Well, recently I don't want to enter very much what many of you probably have heard about this snaking and all these things, and there. So, for instance, well, this is very important work in 1999 of Chamnies, but also Knobloch group has studied a lot and has characterized of the zoo that one can find for this equation. So one has this kind of stair, and then in this stair, I mean, has a saddle node here, fold here, and a fold here, and then has so kind of localized structure with 3 peaks, with 5 peaks, with 4 peaks. I don't know. This is something, and these are the values that we use that are in the subcritical region. So now we start with the equation we have, and now, of course, we introduce some new ingredients I was mentioning before, this defect and the drift. So on the one hand, we introduce some drift, that is some term with some odd derivatives. So one could have some higher odd derivatives, but this is the simplest possible. And then also some special inhomogeneity. And this is because I'm doing in a similar way. I didn't explain very much before, but this is very similar. I'm applying some localized permanent perturbation to the system in some particular region that I decide, and will be my reference of many things that will happen. So introducing these two things, and these two parameters, h is the height of the spatial inhomogeneity and c is the drift velocity, we'll see now that we have physically, we have two competing effects. So on the one hand, the homogeneity, the defect, let's say, tries to pin the structure. So we have some structure here, for instance, as you can see here, the structure likes to sit over the defect, and then has some resistance to be moved by itself. But then I have the drift. The drift just moves things, let's say, to the right. It's trying to push things to the right. So on the one hand, one effect is trying to the system likes. I mean, because of not having anything, the system would move freely. I mean, with this translational invariant, here is no longer translational invariant, likes to sit, but now it's being moved. So the competition between these two effects is the cause of the rich behavior that the system exhibits. So now let's start studying our system, and let's start studying our system in the case that there is no drift. So remember, c, speed, celerity, whatever, it's is 0, but h in principle is different than 0, although there will be, of course, a singular point in which it is 0. Well, why the hell, or whatever, you think I'm considering now negative values of h? In principle, we don't have the intention of studying negative values of h, but the way positive values of h means that they have a defect that goes upwards, and negative values of h means that they have an inverse defect, let's say, a dip. So the important is that what happens here, exactly for h equal to 0. So this is the part that we'll consider later. So we'll have some fundamental solution that now will have some, will not be completely, we'll have some special point, will not be completely flat. Then we'll have a localized structure. The localized structure likes to sit. So this is the dynamical state. So this is the fundamental solution, and the red is the perturbation I'm applying. So I'm making here a rugosity, let's say, at a particular point. So here you can see that the localized structure likes to sit. This way has a peak, has tails. So likes to sit in such a way that so feels comfortably sitting in this way. It likes to stay there if there is no drift, I'm saying. But what happens when h is negative? When h is negative, and this is relevant here because of this reason, then having this negative thing, then the localized structure does no longer like to sit, let's say, the center of the localized structure on the defect, but now the tail, of course, as you can see, fits better with the dip, so likes to sit in this way. And why is this important, this negative region? Well, because at h equal to 0, and these are things of mathematics and bifurcation theory, there is a, so here there's this branch, this shifting this way, here is this localized structure. Now what happens here is that there's an exchange of stability at this point between these two branches. So this is called, is known as a transcritical bifurcation. So I have here this branch that now continues, does not disappear. Here the branch does not appear out of the blue, but it was there, but it was unstable, but they exchange stabilities. And also there's an exchange between the stable branches. So this let's say the effect of this negative region of values of h is very important. What happens now, water, is, of course, this is the simplest case, c equal to 0. Now what, here there are two southern node bifurcations, so this is really unstable. Now, what is important is what happens when I now h, so c the trick is no longer 0, but for instance, just to make things easier to understand, is very small. So in this case, what happens is that as is written here, the bifurcation becomes imperfect. So this is well known in bifurcation theory. When I apply some imperfection, then branches typically rearrange, cut, disconnect, but then rearrange in the way they can. And what appears here, that is similar, although I didn't stress at the moment, is similar to what appeared when I applied already this defect in the Kerr medium, is that now this branch becomes disconnected, and here a new bifurcation appears. This is a called sneak, southern node on the invariant circle that I already mentioned before. So here, this reconnects, and now new branches appear. And here, another, in this part, another southern node appears. So, well, starting from here, as I said, or here I have this, then here I have this. Then what happens here is that this is equivalent to having, the analogy is like having a rope that is quite loose, and then applying some tension to the rope. So the rope becomes like this, so it becomes shorter and shorter, and here becomes almost smooth. This no longer has all these rounds. So here there are a number of bifurcations that appear, saddle nodes. Here this is a sneak, so this is a spatial saddle node inside the invariant circle. There's a smooth, and here you can see, and still, so these are diagrams in which I'm varying one parameter and then seeing the variable, the U field, and well, there's something. There are a lot of things, but these things can be understood better or not. I don't know, because this diagram maybe already is quite difficult on itself. And this is a diagram in which I'm varying at the same time the two parameters I have in the system. So I'm considering that all the internal parameters of the equation are constant, and let's say that they are reasonable, and I'm changing the two parameters that I have available in this case. So here I have different regions, fundamental solution, oscillatory regime, steady soliton. And here we can compare how this diagram is consistent with this one. For instance, here you can see that I'm changing h, so it means that for some constant value of c, that this is 0.12, but this I'm changing, and I find this line here, this is not written here, a fold of cycles, that is this part in which it's false. Then this H plus, that is a subcritical Hopf bifurcation. Then going, I find this sneak, and then this SN3, and so on. And this is what I find here in sequence, SN3, and so on. And if I do in this region, now for a much higher value of the drift, then I find somehow simpler diagram, because I just find this fold of cycles, the subcritical Hopf, and then I find another bifurcation. Well, I think don't have much time to say this, but this here, these two regions here, and here are much more complicated, and this, for instance, resembles in some sense what I presented before in a different bifurcation. So there are three spatial points, this with C, EB, and SNSL, that organize the whole scenario. I won't say more. Just to say that this part here resembles, this is taken for Buchheimer and Holmes' book, resembles the scenario found in the Van der Pol equation. So, doesn't one have some more water? Or? I don't know why, but I became very thirsty.
Exactly, 10 minutes.
So here there's some representation of the kind of thing. So there is something that maybe is not so clear intuitively, that there's a connection between real oscillations and this behavior, this induced by the drift. So we are, so this really what one observes is this kind of, it's called here, trains of solitons. So the system is, instead of oscillating in time, is producing this perturbation that then go away in the system. Then something very important is that, and we'll see this in a movie in a while, and is that this, so the creation of, so the oscillation, the way in which the system is, I say that is oscillating is because some peak is moving to the right, and then a new peak is created in the left part. So this is the, let's say, the oscillation, this periodic creation of these perturbations. So the way in which this happens is not steady. So the way in which it happens, and we see this in the movie, is that in a short time, we'll have 20 minutes of time. This goes very low. Wow, this grows very fast. Then this stays for a long time, and you can see that around 400, this then goes. So the system has really two different time scales. It has a very fast time scale to grow, so to create a new oscillation, and then this oscillation becomes, this peak becomes like locked for a very long time. It goes very fast, and then becomes for a long time until it goes away. One can see here this part that is related to this one. Now it's a function of time, so I have my coordinate system stop in the center, so here at the peak, and then I see what happens. So I see the time evolution, and I see that there's a very fast growth, and then there's a slow relaxation. So this is very important, and this is also present. Qué malo. So this is also observed here. Here you can see this photograph, like you can see that there's this like moving very fast and then going much slow. And I have a movie here. And you see how it grows very fast, then stays for a while until one goes, and then grows very fast, and then takes. So I have these three regions, and what I can have, so I have this oscillatory regime to which I can access in different ways, and now the rest of the game will be to prove that I may have different excitable behaviors. So I have this, so seen from here, I have oscillatory region and non-oscillatory region. Here is the localized structure, here is fundamental solutions, and I can access from in three ways, so to three lines that are three different bifurcations, and I can have three different excitable regimes. So this is the first regime, and this is the regime that happens when I cross this line. So this line, as I said, is a subcritical Hopf, and also has a fold of cycles. So I have the subcritical Hopf and the fold of cycles, and then when I cross this line, I obtain some excursion, and has the property of type 2 or class 2 excitability. That is one characteristic of this root. So the period is constant. So movie. And this is this was the excitable excursion. So I have, this is a fundamental solution. You can see that the value is quite low, it's 0.2. Then there was this transient peak that then goes away out of the system. So I go to a second one. And the second one is this one. So now I cross this line. So this line here, and here I have another root. I have a supercritical Hopf, but that has immediately the Canard phenomenon. So supercritical Hopf, as you know, I mean, creates a small cycle. This small cycle, in principle, will yield itself a local excitable behavior, but then this small cycle suddenly, like in the physics Nagumo, becomes large. This is what happens here. In this region, it is very difficult to characterize. And then what we have is this kind of excitable excursion, but one that different than before. The reference state, let's say, is a soliton, is not. The fundamental solution has a high value. And here, another rule that I think will be the last one. So here you can see the reference state, and I make the perturbation. Andy, should continue. I don't know what happens. Well, what happens? There's a clinical problem. Stops here. What happens is that now this goes away, but as you can see, what stays has a high value, not as before. So this is a different aspect. And then finally, and here there's no movie, luckily. And this is my last transparency before the conclusions. So in time, I cross here, and now I cross here. This is a sneak line. So this is qualitatively, this is what the system does. So the system is in this stable fixed point, then what has this unstable fixed point has this threshold. Then from here, one makes the perturbation that crosses this line here, this stable manifold, and then the system has some type 1 excitable behavior. So we have 3 excitability roots. 2 of them are type 2, and 1 of them is type 1, or class 1. This is something that before in our Kerr system and whatever, we only found type 1 excitability, class 1 excitability. We never find class 2. So here we have 3 different roots, and the scaling is that it should be, so minus 1/2. Well, I said that was the last transparency, but this actually is not the last transparency. So this finishes our work, but then our work was published something like 1 year ago, in February 2013, and December 6, 2013, this paper appeared. So this paper, of course, we could not do anything to try to reproduce the results because it came later. It's Connie Judici and Baglan in Nice. So as I said before, they are working around 2009 of this soliton tap. So this continuous generation of solitons was the inspiration for our work. Now they were able to characterize this regime in which one has in the same kind of setting, but now excitable. So the oscillatory, the fountain, say soliton fountain behavior is not permanently stable. So here are from their paper. This is supposed to be one excitable excursion. Now here there's noise, so there's something I didn't mention anything in my talk. If there is noise, then noise can excite excitable excursions, and this is the permanent oscillatory, so the soliton fountain regime. This is a specially resolved dynamics nucleation. So this is time. This is equivalent to our one of my pictures before, in which I'm in a station. I'm fixing space and seeing what happens in time, and I see this beautiful periodic thing, and that is the mean value of the interspect time. So it shows that the interspike time, so should be like the period, let's say, times spike to spike, is not in a narrow range that should be in type 2, but is in a quite broad range. And in principle, there's an indication that this is class type 1 excitability, although they were not able to measure the scaling. So whether it's logarithmic or clinic, or whether it's a power law, it's 1 minus, so it should be sneak. If the genericity of our root is valid. So I have made a long introduction about our work in this field, including using computation, and then later I have studied a generic root to add inhomogeneity and grid to any system, so a system that alone cannot have oscillations. And then we find almost all possible kinds of excitable translation. One important result is that we think that, we hope that the results are generic. We have studied other models with the ligatory flavor and others, and the results, Matias again, so the result comes from the addition, really from the addition of these two extra ingredients. This is all, but thinking my co-workers in the last part, at Pedro, that you know, Damian Pera, and also in many parts of the talk, the work of Adrian as well. And these are our publications. Thank you.
Now it's time for questions. Not too many because you already gave a talk of 1 hour.
Yes. Yes.
Seminar is supposed to have
but not more than 1 hour, because we started at 35.
I have one. There is a curiosity that we didn't need to detail. It's the case when you have a negative perturbation and you don't excitability, which is the mechanism that leads. Negative perturbation,
or
the perturbation was negative, but you still get.
No.
And you don't get excitability.
No. So this negative H, so you mean?
Negative H. The pinning of the structure, but not.
You're pinning to the tail. No, but not.
Well, no, we could.
Well, I don't know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. You're probably right. We didn't look at that.
No, this, as I said, is important because of this diabolic point, let's say, the transcritical bifurcation.
You have a negative pass.
You mentioned this, right?
You have a negative perturbation and you get a response. Although it should be inhibited.
We have not studied, only to obtain this plot and to see that this is the origin of these broken, these imperfectly saddle nodes that are here and so on, but we have no longer explored.
But let me answer a question. Can you go to the diagram where you put all the double arrows? Can you go further?
Double arrows? What do you mean double arrows?
Keep going.
Okay.
The next one. Next.
Yeah, here.
In this one, a perturbation is the arrow, it's changing the age. In some of them, you trigger the oscillatory regime by a negative change of age, so by reducing age. I see. Okay? Yeah.
But we're not exploring really, unless you are here.
But a given age is a given operation point which you have a fixed point steady state. When you change age, which will be changing negative value,
well, in particular here. In particular, in principle here, is the case is more clear.
Variation of age could be negative.
In this case, we are, for instance, in this line, one in principle is here, and then really applying a negative age to come here transiently and return.
In the case of static localized structures, Manuel showed that there is the possibility to use it as logical gates. When the thing is moving, is it easy to
static? You means that they. So no temporally, yeah, non-drifting, yeah.
Now, you have this continuous flow of progressive structures. Is it easy to use?
We think so, but the study already of the setting that was in the New Journal of Physics was already, I mean, because one thing is when you're studying just one, but when you have two or three, then you have to optimize the parameters, the distance, and so on.
In this case, the gates, so the input and output ports would be where the perturbation is, so where you have the defect. And that's still stationary in this sense.
Yeah, but
So that when you trigger the output, that the solitons comes out, then that breaks. So you have at the same time the input port and the buffer memory. But,
I mean, since you used to the dimensions of the perpendicular one.
Exactly, exactly.
Between those things we have
Exactly.
we have not done the simulations. So.
The most logical, in my opinion, would be to have the three and having a second dimension and then having the three in the perpendicular dimension, of course.
If you put the perturbation in the profile of in the linear term instead of adding it, do you learn similar things? Yes. Yes and no, you know.
Well, yes, essentially.
And if you change the shape of the perturbation, if therefore Gaussian, you take another thing, is the same.
No, I'm asking, instead of using
Instead of using
you put it on
H.
the top of
Yes, it does the same.
Well, there are some.
But basically, I mean, the mechanism is the same. Then
Essentially the same, yeah.
Yeah, details on
The difference is that in that case, the homogeneous state, so that here the one, you say that?
Yeah. If you add it in R instead of adding D.
Yeah, exactly. So the fundamental solution, instead of having a D, continues to be Z. Because that's in the limit. In that case, there are some things that are different. But essentially, the transition from stationary to oscillatory remains the same. So there are some details, but the main feature that we checked that because Repelli asked for that. We had to. So that not depend. When we put the spatial inhomogeneities, we think that we have to some extent prove that does not depend on the spatial shape or the place where you put the spatial inhomogeneities. So you put them anywhere, and you have drift, you have this.
You need pinning and drift, and that's it.
Exactly.
That's all we think of it.